I'm Alicia Leslie, and this is my friend Sue Merrow, and we are happy to have you join us with Voter 101. You know, a lot of people just don't vote. Did you know in the 2016 election, over 100 million people did not vote? You heard that right. 100 million people. 43% of all the people that were registered to vote didn't. And I'd like to see that change, because that means 43% of the people who should have a voice really didn't use their voice. So I decided to figure out why people haven't voted. So the first thing I did is I did a survey. I put it on Facebook. I sent it out to the public, to everyone. Do you know how many responses I got? And I've even got thousands of friends and followers. I got one response. And that one response was that they didn't feel confident in what they were doing. I think others might have even been embarrassed to admit that they didn't vote. You know, yeah, sure, I voted. Yeah, right. Nah. So what I decided would be important is to help people to feel confident in their vote. Now, I do not have that kind of expertise, so I asked my friend Sue Merrow, who is very, very experienced in politics, to help me to provide this information for you. So Sue, would you introduce yourself, knowing I give you every star?
No. Well, my name is Sue Merrow. I live in East Haddam, Connecticut, and I've, for most of my life, been interested in public policy and how it affects us and how it's made. And one of the most important places that it's made is in the voting booth. The people that you elect are the ones you're electing them to make the policies that affect you. I was for 12 years the first selectman, like the mayor of my town, this town, which means that I've myself been a candidate, so I have some experience on both sides of the voting booth, and also have been a lobbyist at the state capitol for nonprofit groups and public policy, particularly on environmental issues.
It's a good point. Well, she knows what she's talking about, so we're going to kind of go back and forth. She's going to help me, I'm going to help her. So I think we want to look at the various things that affect voters and non-voters, and I think one thing that people don't vote because of the confidence lacking. Another is apathy. You know, I think some people just, especially you hear so many people now saying, I'm sick and tired of seeing the signs, I'm sick and tired of the slamming back and forth, I'm sick and tired of the arguing and the debates, and they just don't want to know. Then we've got the ones that are just lazy, which happens. So what do you think are some of the reasons why people don't vote?
Well, it does take some time. I mean, it does take some time out of your day. You have to arrange your day to get to the polls, and you have to make the effort. I think we should all think about things that we can do to make it easier, to look for ways to make it easier for people to cast their vote. But I think if people feel more confident in that they're going to make a good choice and feel more strongly about the issues, then that'll get them hopefully to the polls.
I hope so too. And then of course once they get to the polls, there's a lot of voters that didn't necessarily make the best choices. And I have to be very honest here that I'm very grateful when I was a kid that you couldn't vote at 18. See, that's how old I am. When I was a kid, 18, you could not vote. No vote for you. And I would have voted for JFK if I did. And do you know why?
Because he was very handsome.
He was very handsome, and he was Catholic. And as a Catholic young girl, that would have been the vote. Now, it doesn't mean that it would have been wrong to vote for JFK. It meant that if that was the criteria I was basing it on, it wasn't a very good choice. So other people that vote, like, you know, they just kind of go in and they just, whatever their parents did, they did. What do you think are some of the mistakes that people that vote make as they cast that vote?
As I drove across town today, I was looking at all the signs, and I would really hope that people wouldn't just vote for the person that has the most signs.
Ooh, that's a good point.
But you really owe it to yourself to make sure you know what the person stands for, and what they're pledging to do, and what their values are, what they are promising to your community, because that's really what you have to hold them accountable for after, and that's what you are going to try to make happen in your town, in your life.
Yeah, yeah. And so many people, though, too, it's like the standard saying is that politicians lie. That those are all just campaign lies. How do we keep that from happening? How do we keep from buying the lie?
Well, first of all, it's important to know that if you're looking at a candidate who is currently in office, that we call an incumbent, if you're looking at incumbents, they have a record. You can look at their record. You can look to see what they've actually done with their votes since the last election, and that it's all public record. It's on the record what their votes were, either in the state legislature or locally, or in Congress. You can find it out online, or if that seems daunting, there are organizations that are following votes and keeping voting tallies and keeping voting records. Organizations that make endorsements of candidates base it on their voting records. So if there's an organization that you respect that is keeping track of votes, check into the voting records of the incumbents. If the person does not have a voting record, then they're making promises, and it's hopefully you might find an opportunity to ask them how they're going to do this thing that they're promising. If they promise that they're going to cut your taxes in half, find out exactly what it is that they're proposing to do, and ask about, well, what's the ramifications of that? Where is that money going to come from if you cut everyone's taxes in half? So probe a little deeper. Try to get a little beyond just the promise.
That tax thing, I don't think there's been an election where there weren't promises made to people to cut their taxes. And whether or not that happened, sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But as a minister, something that really bothers me is when people try to get out of paying their taxes. Because our taxes are how we get roads and protection, and it's all, to me, a part of being a country, a part of being a part of the human race, So the taxes things, the getting the taxes done, yeah, you don't want to be taken advantage of, and you don't want to see your tax money wasted. But guys, no, paying taxes is part of our right, our privilege, and our responsibility as citizens. That's how I see it anyway. So I have a little warning for you, by the way, about being a voter. You may or may not actually find when you go to the polls that you are not registered. Have you checked your registration? Because many voter rolls are being scrubbed. Now, it's not necessarily somebody doing something evil. In some cases, the intentions might not be good. But in other cases, if you're a registered voter, you haven't voted in 5-10 years, you know what? Use it or lose it. You might have lost it. So find out how to get it back. Go to vote.org. vote.org. You can find out if you're registered, how to register, how to check your registration, and how long you've got. Because for some states, including, the only one I remember today is Kentucky, this is the last day to register before midterms. And these are probably going to be the most important midterms and the most active midterms we've had in decades, if ever. So please check your registration. That's before, you may do all this work and learn how to vote and not be able to vote, So, all right. So why vote at all?
Well, first of all, as we've been saying, the people that you're going to elect are people who will have the power to shape your lives and to shape the what you care about, the issues that you care about are going to be in their hands, number one. Also, if for no other reason, because a lot of people fought really hard and gave up their lives to give you this privilege, and this is probably the most important single privilege that you have in a democracy. This is what democracy is all about. And especially if you're a woman, think about the women who struggled so hard and were beaten and ridiculed and even force-fed and thrown in jail to give you this right to vote. And if you haven't seen the movie Iron Jawed Angels,
It's a
worth
must.
it. Look
It's
it
a
up.
must.
You will be amazed to see what those women went through.
Yes, and I think especially for younger people, even millennials, because like 100 years ago today, my grandmother could not have voted. The vote, women were allowed to vote in 1919, which was the year my mother was born. So she could vote. You have a privilege and a right, and I'm very happy to say I did send out a little picture, a meme about that with Susan B. Anthony's picture on it, and it said people fought for your right to vote, use it. And I can't tell you, I have never posted anything, not even a joke, not even a cute kitten thing, that's been shared so much. So I'm very excited that people are sharing with others to use our right to vote. I also, because of Sue, the first time we talked about doing a video, we talked about the word constituent, and you know it's a word we use, but I really wasn't positive what it meant. So the minute she was out the door, I didn't want her to know I didn't know, couldn't really define it. So I went to Google and I looked up a constituent, and a constituent is a part of a whole. And I really like the way it says that because we are all a part of a whole. We're part of a whole family, a whole government, a whole world community. So I really like that. And as a part of it, we have a right and responsibility to vote. Very good. Okay. But, there's always that but, Does our vote count? Does our vote really count? I hear that a lot, especially when it's tied to the Electoral College. So, whose vote counts, mine or theirs?
Well, first of all, just in my lifetime in this town where we live, in a neighboring town, there was an election that where it was a tie, and that election had to be settled by a coin toss.
Unbelievable.
So that means that if one more person had come out to vote, or if one person had voted a different way, it could have changed the course of history in that town. Our current congressman in our district has now been in for a number of terms, but his first election he won by 83 votes out of several 100,000 cast.
Yeah.
So then you know that your vote does make a difference, and that the course of history has been actually changed by just one vote.
Could be your vote. Yes,
That's
it
right.
could. It could. Okay, well, is there, the Electoral College, how does that work?
Well, I know it's confusing, but it's written into the Constitution that every state gets to send electors after the election to cast the vote of their state. And each state gets, the number of electors is the number of congressional districts you have plus the number of senators you have. Now in our state we have 5 congresspeople and 2 senators. Every state has 2 senators, but you can have any number of congresspeople. So we have 7 electoral college votes. The difficult thing about the electoral college is that it's winner take all in your state. If your candidate gets just one more than half of all the votes in your state, they get all of the votes of the Electoral College. If they get way more than half, if they get, if they get 95% of the votes, they get the same number of Electoral College votes. And this leads to a situation where you could win the Electoral College votes of the whole country, but the popular votes could add up to more than the popular votes of the person who gets the Electoral College votes might not be as many as the popular votes for their opponent. If
That
that
just
makes
doesn't
sense.
seem fair.
It doesn't seem
It just
fair.
doesn't seem fair.
So it was set up to be a safeguard. I know people are afraid that the electors in their state maybe won't cast their Electoral College votes for the person who wins the popular vote in their state. I've never seen that happen. But the fact that it's winner take all, and this leads to this situation where the popular vote winner does not necessarily get the majority of the Electoral College votes, is the reason that it's been so controversial lately.
What can we do about it?
Well, you could either change the Constitution, which is very difficult to do and very time-consuming and always dangerous when you open up the Constitution, that other mischief will take place. But there is also something called National Popular Vote, which is a movement whereby states can pass a law within their state that says that they will give their Electoral College votes to the person who wins the popular vote nationwide, even if that person didn't win the popular vote in their state. But that compact that they would join to do this only goes into effect when the states that have passed this legislation control more than half of the Electoral College votes, so that would control the outcome of the Electoral College, and it would give the Electoral College votes to the winner of the popular vote. They haven't quite got there, about halfway to the number of Electoral College votes that they need. Our state of Connecticut has passed the legislation to join this compact.
Well, I think that's a pretty good idea. So, we in Connecticut don't have to do anything. That it depends on the other states to
At this
pick it up
point,
from
it's
here.
other states that...
Well, if you live in another state that hasn't made up its mind, is there work being done to make it happen?
I hope so. I believe that the National Popular Vote movement is at work in all states, trying to encourage states to pass the legislation to join this compact.
See, there's so much, and it's not hard, but there's so much we just don't know, and I'm sure hoping that we are giving you some good pointers that will not only encourage you to vote, but inform you so a way that you can, right?
Yes. Yes, and there's lots of organizations that will, if you're concerned about what's true and how to sort out fake news from real news, there are organizations that have done that. You can go online to very respected, reliable fact-checking organizations too that will help you sort
Good
out
idea.
the truth. Right?
Good idea. And while we're talking about that, before you pass on, I don't care how tempting or sensational or juicy or whatever, that little meme you got, or that statement, that glaring sensationalist thing, before you share it, check it. It takes approximately 15 to 30 seconds to check a meme or a Facebook message or even a piece of news that you find. Takes seconds to check it. Please be sure you do that. With all that fake stuff out there, like I say, it takes seconds to just check, and we want to give you some ideas of where you can check. And here is, there's a little something which I'm hoping you can see clearly. If not, message me at reveille@aol.com and I'll send it to you. But these are Snopes.com factchecker.com, Politico.com. And then you've got vote.org to make sure you're registered. Underneath there, we have the National Popular Vote.com and commoncause.org and the League of Women Voters, LWV.org, who gives us all kinds of good information. I love that League of Women Voters, and they are bipartisan, so it's and they apply to just not women's issues, to everything. They did a wonderful voter guide when I lived in California, and they had pros and cons, and it was so good. And you know what? On some of it, I really found myself vacillating a little. And so it can change the way you vote if you do just a little bit of investigation.
And
So,
I just add that both Common Cause and the League of Women Voters, very old, very respected organizations. Their mission is open, honest, accessible government. And it's not glamorous work, but they're out there every day fighting and working to make sure that your vote counts. So they're very reliable.
we have to be so grateful to them, because most of us think that voting happens on voting day and don't know all that goes on behind the scenes. So when we're thinking about values and we're thinking about truth and fiction and how we want to make good decisions, we come down to partisanship. And are you a Democrat? Are you Republican? Are you an independent or third party? Do you join a third party? My head's going to explode. How do we handle partisanship? You know, I mean, some people are very blind. It's what their father did, it's what their mother did, it's what they do. Now, in all honesty, I know my parents were Democrats, but that's all I know. Because in our house, you did not discuss politics and you did not discuss religion. Nobody cared about baseball, I'm sorry, but it's the way it was. But how do we make a party choice or not, or maybe we shouldn't?
Well, each party has a platform. All parties, any political party, whether it's one of the major parties or a third party, they somewhere have written down what they stand for. So you get to look at that and decide whether that's what you want to put your support behind. If you don't register with a party, you register as unaffiliated. People say that they're independent, but you are actually, what you are is unaffiliated. So if you're not registered with a party, you are unaffiliated, which means that no matter whether you're registered with a party or not, when you go in the voting booth, you can vote for anybody you want. The one thing is that if you are unaffiliated, you cannot vote in a primary. So you give up that option if you are unaffiliated. But there are also third parties that are building strength, and they're raising important issues and working hard, and they serve a very important purpose to raise issues and get us talking about issues. And occasionally they win. We had a governor a couple of decades ago, Lowell Weicker, who was a third party candidate and won the governorship in Connecticut. So they do occasionally win, but the challenge is when you go into the voting booth, when you want to think about when it's time to vote, if you're supporting if there's a third party candidate that you really like what they have to say, but they don't have a chance of winning, the strategic question to ask yourself is, am I throwing away my vote if I vote for this candidate? Sometimes a third-party candidate can be considered what we call a spoiler, if they take votes, if they can't win, but they take votes from somebody who could have won and would have been a better outcome for the election.
It's tough. It's tough, but I think that, you know, your values have to come first. Do you join a third party? Do you join like a party, or?
You can.
You can?
You can, when you register to vote, you have, several options of parties to join, or you can remain unaffiliated. You can be registered to vote, but not affiliated with any party.
Okay. I'm wondering if one day down the road, maybe it would be required to be a part of a particular party, even the third party. I don't know. It's all, I guess that's the part that still is, in my question mark place, that I'm not positive of how it works. Okay, so remember, if you vote, it's possible if you vote independent or, vote for third party, whatever, you could negate your vote, or you could open a door to something totally new. And I think we were talking one day and you were sharing that the third parties call the other people they bring up issues and stuff like that.
The important role I think that third parties play is that they introduce issues, they get people talking, you sort of raise the floor under the debate and get people talking. I know there'll be a governor's debate tomorrow night in our state, and the third party candidate is there'll be a Democrat, a Republican, and a third party candidate. I forget what he's calling his party. So he'll be on that stage with the others, and they will respond to him equally. So he'll introduce some ideas that'll change the debate and maybe cause the other candidates to try to outpromise each other.
Yeah, outpromise each other. What are the actual chances if I decided to go to a debate? What are the chances I'll get in, and what are the chances I'll be heard?
Well, of course, if you go to a debate, you're only listening. You're gonna.
Oh, you don't get to even think. You can't submit questions.
Well, sometimes they let you. Sometimes there's the opportunity to submit questions, but they could, in a statewide debate, they could fill a whole auditorium with people, and only a few questions will get asked.
So what do you do with all your other questions?
Well, you keep looking for public forums at the local level. The local level is such a good place to get involved in political action because the debates are much smaller, the public forums are much smaller. The Chamber of Commerce might have a forum in which there would be just a much smaller group of people that you would get to ask a question. But at a big statewide debate, you are more of a listener, but they can be very enlightening to hear what the candidates have to say, especially if they're well run and the moderators really make sure people get heard and they draw out the answers. League of Women Voters are often called upon to moderate debates because they're very good at it.
That's a good thing. Yeah, because I know they have campaign things, but then there's the debates. I think what's bothered me sometimes is the questions are not going for the topics I want.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a list of topics, this is what's going to be on the list of questions, I might be more inclined. I think sometimes I'm afraid I'll go, and even listening, I will feel I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm like that. That's why I don't watch some controversial television, because I yell at the TV.
I just would add that in a debate, almost always they start out with each candidate having an opportunity to make an opening statement, and then after the back and forth, at the end, they almost always get a chance to make a closing statement.
Well, that's pretty good.
And those always are very illuminating. Those show you what that candidate thinks is their most important winning arguments, and what is a real clear indication of what you'll be voting for if you vote for them.
Cool. That is interesting. Just to look back at the whole partisan thing one more time, there is a lot to know, and I loved hearing Sue say that you don't, because you're registered this party or that party doesn't mean you've got to go in and that's the only choice you have. You can go in there and vote for either side if you so desire, or the 3 or 4 or however many candidates are there. And at the same time, I wanted to go back very briefly to having the two-party system that we have, and how I feel about it is that people would say, generally speaking, that the Republicans tend to be conservative and the Democrats tend to be liberal. Now, that doesn't mean they're not conservative, liberal Democrats and liberal Republicans, because I think they're all, and then there's the moderates, which are in the middle. I think they're both important, because to me, the parties are kind of like a bird, and you need two wings, whether that's by, just in general, we need conservatism and we need liberalism. We need both in order to be whole, in order to be full, in order for the bird to fly. And we remember that we are in the center, and that's what we want to be, is center grounded and letting these things, helping them to lift up, whatever that means you do with your vote, as long as you know what really is meaningful when you go into that booth. So one other thing that talking partisan stuff, I thought it was ironic. Why do you go by all those signs on the road and it doesn't say, is that a Democrat or a Republican? How do you even know? I'm a Democrat. Do I want to like that person?
Well, I've noticed also in the last, 10 or 15 years, people tend to not put their party affiliation on their signs, and it's a choice. And I think, I'm guessing that their thinking is, I want people to look beyond just that label. I want people to be interested enough in me to look beyond, to judge me by what I stand for, and not just the party that I stand for, or to care enough about it to find out a little bit more about me. So, I think it's probably a good thing, because we've gotten into such a highly partisan, tribal state that you might just shut your mind to someone if you see their party affiliation. Whereas if you're willing to listen just a little bit, you might find out that we have more in common than you might have otherwise.
Yeah, you made a good point when you said that everything is so divided, so separated. And do you have any little bit from a political perspective? Do you have any little bit of just a line or two of how people can not lose their friends and families while we're trying to, should politics come up in conversation?
Right. Well, it's hard to do, but sometimes you just have to listen. You just have to, chances are, if you meet someone who has really strong convictions, there's nothing that you're going to say that's going to change their mind. And maybe you just have to listen, unless they give you a sign that they're interested in what you have to say. And you can practice stating your convictions and your feelings in a way that isn't threatening or rancorous. Just stating what you believe in a calm, rational way. But it's probably good that Thanksgiving comes after elections.
That's funny, you're reading my mind, because I was thinking that myself.
But at least that, hopefully by Thanksgiving everybody is calmed down and can have a discussion about their ideas, and not draw those lines in the sand.
Yeah, it's a good thing. One last line in my sand. Money. Every single email I get, every piece of mail, everyone's always asking for money. What do we do? Is there any way to get the money out of politics, like a lot of people are saying?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that that your little bit of money and my little bit of money and the little bit of money of people like us right now is the only thing that is counterbalancing a whole bunch of what they call dark money. That Supreme Court decision about 10 years ago called Citizens United, that said that corporations are people and that they can put unlimited amounts of money into campaigns and not disclose where the money came from. So even though we all resent being asked for money, it's those little small donations is the only thing that's counterbalancing that the big corporate interests on the other side and that we can't track.
Yeah.
So try to do what you can and try to not be put off too much by the small contributions. There are, in our state of Connecticut, we do have a system of public finance of election campaigns. Candidates who qualify by raising a certain amount of money from small donations, you have to get a certain number of small donations, can qualify for a grant of money to run their campaign, which frees them up from spending all of their time on the campaign trail trying to get money out of rich people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
It frees them up to talk to real citizens and talk about real issues and not just try to suck up to people with money.
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? But and is there any organization that's trying to like level the playing field?
Well, a Common Cause worked really hard and the League of Women Voters worked very hard for that citizens for that public finance of election campaigns in our state, and both of those organizations are working all the time to try to have better laws that control the money that comes into campaigns. That if you want a level playing field, the biggest challenge to that is where the money comes from, the big money.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see that get fixed. That's just, because sometimes you can be you got a really good person, really good values, but you got no money to put into making all those signs that annoy people on the road,
Yeah.
All right, so the election's over. They announced the winner. Is that the end?
No, it's actually being a voter is just one part of your role in a democracy. The rest of the time, your role is to get to know the candidates, get to know the people that won, get to know your elected officials, hold their feet to the fire. If they made promises, be there to remind them that they made promises. If issues come up in between elections, to let them know your wishes. I've seen at the state house level, as few as 5 personal contacts from a constituent has changed the way they would vote on an issue, and one vote often changes the way whether or not a bill passes, and that can make a huge difference. So stay involved, keep watching. You don't have to be, you can be polite about it. You can be, we always say, never burn your bridges. No matter how angry you are with the candidate, don't burn your bridges, because you might be angry with them today, but next week they could be the one vote that you really need to get something passed. So try to keep a good working relationship, try to keep in contact, and try to become a respected source of information to your elected officials.
That's an excellent point. You are a source of information. And if we keep our mouths shut and don't share what we're thinking, you know what? It's never going to get fixed. If something's broken, we got to let someone know it's broken. Oh, well, that was such fun. And I thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
And I pray knowing this will make a difference for you. And you will get out there and vote.